So many of the people who are in the correctional facilities that in the old days would be in a much more therapeutic setting than what prison is. And we're asking, and it's important to remember, we have jails, which is county level, prisons, which is state level, but these are folks who are in law enforcement who are now really forced to be social workers, counselors, trying to figure out what is this person's problem when they were trained and what the job they went into was law enforcement. So we have things pretty messed up, and it is costing us a lot of money, and I think it's impacting a lot of lives.
That's a percentage of the budget. I know that because of Amendment 23, the education piece of the pie keeps growing no matter what the entire budget does. And then you've got Medicare and Medicaid that also take up a lot, and everything else gets squeezed, including higher ed and prisons, right?
Prisons is one of the top three. It is K-12, then it's Medicaid, and then it's prisons. Now, percentage-wise, it's something like 9% of the total budget. So you go 9%, that doesn't sound like a big deal. The numbers are a big deal. And when it squeezes out higher ed and many of the other things, a lot of folks, some folks would say, we don't need to be doing those programs. We don't need to be funding college. But the economic driver in the state is education, whether it's K-12 or college. And so if we are short of money, higher ed is the one that goes. K-12 is on automatic pilot. So their funds are going forward. It's worth looking at.
What I find really fascinating about this is that the Independence Institute, you know, we're good hardcore fiscal conservatives. Years ago, we said, wait a second, this is an issue we need to look at because we're open to looking at fiscal issues mostly. And we're saying we're spending 30 grand a year to keep somebody behind bars who's not violent. This doesn't make sense to us. And when we came out and said, you know, we need to look at sentencing reform, we got pushback from, surprisingly, a lot of conservatives who I think have an understandable reaction that, no, law and order says bad guys need to be put into prisons. I also heard a lot from the guys in uniform that said, listen, people in prison are not just casual users. You don't find your way into prison unless you're guilty for other stuff, and that a lot of the non-violent criminals might actually be there for violent reasons, but we were able to get them more easily on a non-violent charge. I think this is the Al Capone type defense. Al Capone, who was brought to justice not for killing people, but for not paying his taxes. So what of that argument, that a lot of these people who are, quote, non-violent drug users are in prison, and it's about 20% of the prison population, does that sound about right? That a lot of them really are bad guys.
Well, I think there is a grain of truth to that, for sure. And part of it is that plea bargaining really distorts things. I mean, our criminal justice system really isn't a very truthful system in the sense that you get arrested for what you do, you get charged with what you did, you get sentenced and convicted. So it allows for a lot of distortion in terms of
I do armed robbery, but I plea bargain it down to something that has nothing to do with armed anything.
Or, you know, burglary, which would be, robbery would be considered to be a violent offense, burglary would be considered to be a non-violent offense. So I think it is a little bit of a slippery slope to talk, and not only that, but there are a lot of folks that may have been convicted of a non-violent offense that are in prison right now that have prior criminal records for violent offenses. So it is really, I think it's important not to draw too bright a line in terms of we're going to have a certain amount of policy around or a certain set of policies around non-violent, people convicted of a non-violent offense versus people that are convicted of a violent offense. What's much more sophisticated is looking at things called risk assessments, right? And they're not relying exclusively on what somebody was convicted of this time. They're looking at them in a bigger picture. And so what we start to talk about, and I think the Division of Criminal Justice just developed a whole new risk instrument, is to look at low risk, medium risk, high risk, very high risk, and then to be developing strategies along that continuum.
The law and order question of that. Can we devise a system where we're able to look at this by case and say, this is a guy who we think if we let out into the general population and give an alternative sentence, that is an ankle bracelet, parole, community service, I don't want these guys to go off scot-free for their crimes, but I don't want to pay $30,000 a year to keep them up. Is there a way to do this so that we minimize the risk of those guys who are out in the population again committing a real crime?
That's what the Commission, I think, is looking at, and Christie referred to it before, evidence-based. We are looking statewide, state to state, what's working in different places and what should we implement. So we took apart legislatively what bills might need to be passed, what policies within the Department of Corrections need to be passed or changed, probation, parole, all these things where somebody accidentally hits the tripwire, but everybody around goes, boy, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I think the Commission's identifying those things. It's pulling together people who don't traditionally work together. I carry 2 bills this session on juvenile justice issues. Just last year, we had a very explosive debate about the direct file, which has to do with if a juvenile commits a crime, a murder typically, of a certain level, will they be charged as an adult? And we had the left and we had the right, and we had the DAs and we had the public defenders, and it was very not productive. So we spent time figuring some things out, and we came up with 2 areas of agreement. And so I call it the kumbaya moment. We have had a few kumbaya moments this year.
Let's talk about that. We've only got a couple minutes left in the program, but I'm seeing some real movement thanks to some brave people on the right who are willing to say, listen, you can do this, and it doesn't mean you're soft on crime. And of course, you people on the left who just want to let everybody out of prison and have them feed at my kitchen table. But I'm seeing that there's actually some momentum. I still sense a lot of resistance among the law and order types in the conservative movement. Talk a little bit about this cooperation. I think it's becoming a political reality. If we're going to take on the budget, this is going to be one of the issues we're going to have to face with our eyes wide open.
Well, my sense is that a lot of people are appreciating the fact that what we're doing isn't sustainable. Whether we like it, we don't like it, it is almost irrelevant at this point. It's not sustainable. We can't afford it. We can't keep doing it. And I think there are enough interests, particularly like what Representative Roberts was saying, sheriffs who are really struggling in their jails because they have so many people with serious mental illness that are cycling in and out, that people are coming together to talk about what are solutions to some of these problems, because we can't stick our head in the sand. We just can't. And the legislature asked, by creating a commission, to bring experts together to say, hey, help us develop some strategies that can promote public safety and do a better job within the criminal justice system. So it's not as controversial as you might think.
Well, when I suggested this years ago during the referendum C battle, we said, wait a second, we could save a lot of money by looking at criminal justice reform, sentencing reform. From the Republican side, what I got was, are you crazy? We're not letting those people out. And what's changed there? And we've only got about a minute or so.
We have to work on it. We have to not let people create their political careers on creating new crimes that perhaps are better for media moments as opposed to good public policy. So I think the key is, if you truly are a fiscal conservative, you should be concerned about what is on the books in Colorado and what people keep bringing forward. What I've said to folks is, if you want to create a new crime, tell me which one we're taking off the books. Is there something, if this is that much of a threat to people, is there something that is not a threat that is as costly to people? So I think the concentration on the cost, and it doesn't have to be the touchy-feely thing. It may have some spin-off benefit to those who are more concerned on the programs, not to point at you, Chrissy, but...
You can point at her.
Okay.
She's squishy. It's okay.
But, and some say I am too, but only because I feel we have to get in this conversation. And whether you're left or right, the bottom line is we're spending an awful lot of money and we're not doing it wisely.
All right, to put a cherry on top of this, so not only is it good for the people who are suffering through these problems or committed the crimes, it actually is good for me because we can talk about the budget and save some coin.
Yes.
Representative, thank you. Christie, thank you, and thank you for watching. Check out more progress on this, or look for us at the Justice Policy Project at the Independence Institute. Mike Krause runs that up. That's independenceinstitute.org. We'll see you next week. You jibber jab, bamboozle, nook and noozle, bippity bop, she-call. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off.